Welcome everyone, Andrew Lawton here from True North, joined by Anthony Furey, two fellows in the most literal and figurative senses outside the action at the Manning Center Conference. If you've been following on Twitter and Facebook, you've no doubt seen some of the things that are going on. Premier Doug Ford spoke this morning, Conservative leader Andrew Scheer just spoke. We've done some great sit-down interviews with some of the key players here. None more exciting than Anthony Furey and me in one place to, well, hopefully one or two of you. Anthony, how are you having a good time so far?
Great, always great to be here at the Manning Networking Conference. I've been coming here for pretty much since it began. It's been going on for a number of 6 or 7 or 8 years or so, and a really interesting place, as you know, Andrew, to see conservative-minded individuals, not necessarily big C conservatives. It's a small C conservative event. It's not an official party event. See people sort of get together and talk about the movement in general and the issues of the day as they kind of relate to all of that. So always compelling stuff, not just the big headline item people, but the people you meet in the halls and talk to them about how things are going, get a feel for, you know, you touch base with someone from Alberta will be here, someone from the East Coast, how's your region going, how's that issue, and it's really informative from that level.
Yeah, it is, and it's interesting because the first Manning conference I came to was in 2014, and that was Harper majority, would be over in a year, but it was there. And then I was here 2 years ago, and that was a little bit of a different tone, obviously, but there was still very much a rallying going on. The Conservative leadership race was happening, and there was a big leadership debate. This year I find kind of interesting because we were chatting before this started, and this is the last rallying point, really, for Canadian Conservatives, small c and big C, before the election. And do you feel it? Do you feel that here?
Just between us, I'm not feeling it too much. I mean, there's a momentum and an energy. There's you know there's conviction politicians, and then there's people who aren't conviction politicians. And you know, Barack Obama was a conviction politician. That hope and change. Donald Trump, a conviction politician. Doug Ford, you better believe he is.
Yes.
Andrew Scheer, I think a lot of people would say he's right on the issues. He's a really nice guy, a really sort of warm, personal guy. But the question of rallying cry is still not there. So I'm not sure if I'm feeling this or seeing this from the people right now. I don't know what that means. You talk about a guy like Dalton McGuinty, who governed for something like 12, 13 years. That was a guy who, when he first won, people were saying there's no way he'd win. There was no rallying cry. There's no stuff there. But he prevailed for quite some time. How do you see that whole question?
No, I think that's valid, and I'm interested in deconstructing a lot of what happens in political speeches more than I'm interested in the speech itself. And Andrew Scheer didn't give a speech. He came and did a sit-down conversation with Mercedes Stephenson. Now, Mercedes I like. She's with Global News, West Block. Yeah. She's not doing the softballs necessarily that you normally see at an event like this, so she's a legitimate journalist. But even then, I found it interesting that Andrew Scheer's strategy, which I can impute from his remarks, was to be the everyman. And we heard probably a good 10 minutes cumulatively over the course of his 45-minute session about, I am the son of a nurse and a librarian, I grew up, just like you, I drive a minivan, I've got 5 kids. And I'm not disputing that that's him.
Sure.
But I wonder how much mileage you can get out of that. Because, okay, you're one of us, you're not a trust fund kid like Justin Trudeau, you still got to have the substance there. And I was not getting that really red meat policy that I would have liked.
Yeah, not just your buddy at the bar, your middle-class buddy at the bar, but your middle-class buddy at the bar who goes on to be leader of a G7 nation.
Yeah, exactly.
You need that kind of extra step there.
Yes.
And I guess the question is, how does Scheer get it? How do you think he can get it in the 6 months? Is it possible?
Yeah, and I don't like getting into the prediction game for a couple of reasons, because there are so many variables in politics in general, in Canadian politics. One thing that we really didn't hear today was SNC-Lavalin.
Right.
That was not really something that came up. It came up in a more distant and obscure way, and I don't know if that's something that is because the Conservatives are moving on. I don't know if it's just because of the format. But there's something that I think is a rallying cry to Conservatives, and we're not seeing the Conservative leader do too much in the way of scoring points on that issue. I mean, we've got a corruption scandal, we've got a budget that's trying to give away money, we've got all of these different things, and I still didn't get from that, and I don't want to beat up on the guy, but I didn't get from what we heard today, yeah, this is the Conservatives headed towards a majority government.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree and disagree a bit there, because I think I don't think Andrew Scheer wants to make it all about him right now, and shouldn't, for two reasons. One, it can make it look like he's just like, yay, this guy's imploding and I want to be Prime Minister, so here's my opportunity to get in on this. Because I think the big issue is Canadians with Lapscam right now, they want to know, I want to know, who said what to whom and when did they say it? Because then that's the integral question of, did obstruction of justice happen or not? I think this is a big picture issue. It's like, is Canada becoming like some Eastern European autocracy? Well, no, like the thin edge of the wedge, and that's the question. This is a bigger picture than, will Andrew Scheer win the next election or not? So if he makes it kind of shamelessly all about his electoral prospects, we got a problem there. So when he said, for instance, and he started saying this weeks ago, Justin Trudeau must resign, I was like, there's a good argument.
But he's not going to, so what's next?
There's a good argument to be made that maybe he should not be Prime Minister anymore, so either there will be obstruction of justice charges by the RCMP or the voters will kick him out in October. But, I don't really feel that. So one thing, Tom Mulcair, as you know, was always respected for, during the Mike Duffy scandal, whatever you think about whether that was legit or not, and the courts kind of decided it wasn't, he walked on all 31 charges, Tom Mulcair did a very sort of prosecutorial approach to question period, where he said, who wrote this letter to that, and what did Nigel Wright say to this person at that time? And Tom Mulcair was very respected for doing that. I'd like to see that same type of performance from Andrew Scheer.
Yeah. It's funny you mention that, because this morning Doug Ford spoke, and Doug Ford is that very electrifying figure, and has been. He's got that Ford Nation brand. And one of the things that I found interesting is that Doug Ford was asked a question about the P in the PC party, so the Progressive Conservative, and his answer I actually felt was kind of interesting. He didn't say we're not a conservative party, but he was very clear that, look, I want NDP voters to support what we're doing, I want Liberal voters to support what we're doing, I want all of this stuff, because we were providing change. And change is only valuable when you are offering something specific that is better than what you're changing. Right. Whereas Andrew Scheer, I didn't feel was doing something that was that distinct from that. He was not saying, this is why conservative policies are great. Right. He was saying, this is why we as a party are going to be better than that party. Right. And I know that Canadians, by and large, don't love partisanship, or they say they don't. So I don't know if that may well be more successful than saying this is conservatism, but at a conservative conference, I think that's the distinction, is that I think we were getting here at the Manning Conference a bit more of a general populist messaging.
No, good point. I think you can do both of them. Like when you talk about inspirational and regular Joe, like the Ronald Reagan Sell the Morning in America, Andrew Scheer, in one question, he was asked, are there these sort of neo-Nazi white supremacist type people you've been associated with that, or it was one of those mushy questions that are sort of, I find them quite banal and tedious. Andrew Scheer should have slapped them away, and then also said, I want to cut taxes, I want to reduce government, increase liberty for all Canadians, for Muslim Canadians, for LGBT Canadians, for people of every demographic. This party is for you and for all of you, and these conservative principles are to make a better life and a better Canada for everybody. Come on and be a part of this movement with me. I mean, bring everybody into fold. And a year ago, I know you're doing some events here with, on the schedule here. A year ago, I did an onstage interview with Doug Ford when he was running to be leader of the party. And I can't remember how it came up. I said, what's your campaign going to be? Who are you going to appeal to? And he said, I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to every conservative, every liberal voter, every NDPer. I want your vote. And I said, pause. I remember I said, stop. And for the others, can you repeat that? You believe you will win NDP votes, and you are seeking the NDP demographic. And he said, yes. And I didn't know that part that you mentioned that Doug Ford said earlier. So consistently for a year, he said that Doug Ford said, I'm for everybody. And he's gone after everyone. And, that's a very big task.
And it is interesting. So Maxime Bernier's not here. And I want to get your thoughts on that in a moment. But one thing Maxime Bernier said in an interview, I think it was with Muslim Vote Canada or Muslim Voice Canada, they had said, what are you going to do for Muslim Canadians? And he gave what I thought was a great answer. He said, nothing. Right. Because I'm governing all Canadians. I'm not going to give Muslim Canadians a vote, Serbian Canadians a voice on this issue, and he's not going to go through one by one. And I do think that conservatives need to do a better job at fighting that identity politics. Right. And to be honest, I think Stephen Harper might have actually been worse on that than he could have been, because he was so interested in having the multicultural support. Right. Jason Kenney was in a different ethnic community and cultural community every week, every day. But at a certain point, you've started siloing your message almost. Right. Because so I don't know, where do you think that balance is between engaging different groups and pandering? Because there is a line somewhere.
It's a good question, and I think a lot of Jason Kenney, what he did was genuine outreach. From his perspective, it was genuine outreach. But at a certain point, it just does become pandering when you're going, is it possible? Here's, were I running for party leader or something, if I had a policy, I am not going into any place of religious worship at all. I want to meet all of you, I want to talk to all of you, but I want to do it in another sphere. I don't want it to appear like I'm doing religious pandering. Well, can you do that in Canada? Can it work? Is it that the power brokers just want to corral you there? And okay, fine. It's hard to get 500 people in a room, so a mosque or a synagogue or a church is the best place to get sort of a more critical mass of people. Is it possible and efficient to reach out to all demographics, but not as that demographic, just as voters and Canadians, so you can do your tax pitch for everyone. I want to reform infrastructure for the benefit of transgender people. Can you do that without pandering? I don't have an answer to that.
No, but I think that also speaks volumes about where the Canadian political discourse is, that you have to run those calculations. And I mean, I've always been a big believer in flattening taxes, for example, because if you have a flatter tax, maybe even not a pure flat tax, but if you have a flatter tax, you're basically saying, look, we want everyone to have lower taxes, as opposed to the child fitness tax credit, the home renovation tax credit, the transgender renovator tax credit.
Worst thing Stephen Harper did. That was the worst part of his era.
It's great politics, but it's not as good policy. And to be fair, I mean, we don't have a conservative platform yet. We have a liberal budget, which is basically a liberal platform.
Right.
But I would love to see the conservative message be a solidly conservative message. And I think that if we go beyond speaking style and energy level and all of that, that's where Andrew Scheer can, first off, cut out the Maxime Bernier effect. And also, I think, appeal to centrists and moderates, and also to those red meat policy-want conservatives.
And I would wager the reason why people are here at this Manning conference, that they've traveled across the country, the reason why people join any political party is because ultimately they do believe that their viewpoint, the issues they're advocating
is better than the other,
no, it's better than the other and will make people's lives better. Yeah. So if you're spending all this time and energy doing the political game, go out and tell people, I want to make your life better. I believe my principles will do it. Here's why.
Yeah.
And I think conservatives, and that's the Ronald Reagan pitch. Do that more. That's the challenge. And I see Andrew Scheer's trying to do that. I mean, it's not easy. I don't envy anyone being in these sort of leadership positions. But I think that's the sell. I don't use this in a tacky way, but inclusive in a very technical term.
Yeah, and I do think that's important. And the one issue that I think will always be the front and center is people's pocketbooks. Like, that's always going to be the number one issue. I was chatting with Joe Oliver, and that interview will be out very shortly, and he had said that deficits are important and debt's important and all of that, but you have to go to Canadians and say, this is costing you $400 a year, this is costing you that. So it's about taking these macro concepts and distilling them in levels that the average voter cares and understands, and those are two very important things if you want to win an election.
Yeah, you're right. It's quite an interesting time here to see how that all is all coalescing here.
So we've got a few things coming up. I'm doing a panel on immigration tomorrow, and also the mobbing of Canadian history. What are you looking for? What do you want to be the takeaway from this, Anthony?
Well, back to what we were saying at the beginning, I think the rallying cry, what conservatives who have really come from all across Canada to be a part of this meeting, that is non-official Conservative Party meeting, small C Conservative movement, what do they feel is the issue du jour, whether it's just for them or what Andrew Scheer should take to the polls in terms of the narrative, the story, the issue, where is the fight? Because the fight can be, well, Justin Trudeau's not the Prime Minister. That's the negative story you're telling. But what's the positive story? It's still not, the pieces aren't together. What do you think?
I think you're bang on, and I think that we've got a few months until the election where that narrative is going to be apparent, but I also think that few months is going to be gone in the blink of an eye, because really, if you've got an October election, a RIP period, let's say about 40 days ahead of that, that's the summer. So I mean, the campaign is going to be in full swing before you know it here, and I think these narratives need to be a bit more cemented before we get there. All right, he's Anthony Furey, I'm Andrew Lawton. We'll have more coverage from the Manning Center Conference. For True North, thanks for tuning in.